Greetings, greenhouse people. I'm your host, Bill Calkins, and in an effort to provide this critical information in any way you choose to consume it, we're pleased to offer this discussion in video and podcast formats. My guest today is Broch Martindale, the National Nursery and Greenhouse Strategic Account Manager at Corteva. Broch grew up in a family greenhouse, studied greenhouse production at The Ohio State University, and he and his wife, Jen, currently operate a greenhouse in Indiana, and they supply fresh flowers locally. Broch's joined me on a few episodes. Most of you probably recognize him on this screen, and I'm sure you're well aware of his skills when it comes to sharing detailed technical and cultural information, but it's always grounded in a deep understanding of real-world greenhouse and nursery production. This time around, he's going to talk strategies for controlling and preventing some of the more common pest and disease challenges that everyone pretty much runs into in poinsettia production. We're talking whiteflies, powdery mildew, and more. And I'm sure we'll also touch on plenty of others. Like I always say, Broch is as much a greenhouse nursery technical guru as he is a coach or teacher, so I know that this is going to be an info-packed episode. If you like this installment, be sure to subscribe to the Tech on Demand podcast on your favorite app. We're on just about all of them: Apple iTunes, Google, Spotify, and more. And then you'll find dozens of Tech on Demand videos on the YouTube channel. But that's enough out of me. Broch, welcome. How's it going?
Going good.
Awesome.
Super excited to be here today. Although we're getting ready to talk about poinsettias, and like we're hardly through, the bulk of spring yet. It seems like spring's dragging on because weather and everything else, and here we are already, kicking things off with poinsettia season.
Yep, and folks are already have mums going. So yeah, our industry is interesting in that way. But I know that poinsettias are on people's minds, or at least they should be, at least building a plan and strategies before those cuttings hit the loading dock. And I did forget to mention that you did write an article covering a lot of this information for the May 2025 issue of Grower Talks. I'll put a link to that in the show notes. But because we can do this a little bit more long form, I know there's more to say. In the article, you used a lot of Christmas and holiday references. And I was thinking, and maybe our goal is to see how many of those holiday cliches we can pack into the next half hour. I don't know. But we should get down to business because Santa's not coming down the chimney while I'm talking. Why don't you tell us a little bit about why this topic is important and why you wanted to write an article about it, and then jump on this podcast and dig into it a little bit more.
Yeah, well, I think that, while poinsettias are a consistent crop for many people and they kind of have their tried and true recipes that they have for success, it still seems like year after year, growers are still challenged by the same challenges they've always had. And so, I think about the number of calls that we get in during the season when we're talking about what those challenges are. And so really, it's just to kind of reinforce some of the information that we've heard from growers and share with them what we're sharing as potential solutions to their problem and helping them tweak those programs that they have. And so, I think we'll go ahead and dig in and see how things go.
Sounds good. It's super timely right now. Like we said, everybody wants to grow the absolute best crop. We cannot afford losses in a poinsettia crop these days. Why don't you go ahead and take over, jump in, and if I have any questions or follow-ups, I will bring them up. But why don't you go ahead and get started?
Excellent. Thanks. Appreciate the introduction. We're not going to spend much time here. You guys heard enough already on the background story from me. But really wanted to kind of give you a level set of the agenda for today. So we're going to talk about 3 products that should be important to growers when we're thinking about poinsettia production. We're going to talk a little bit about Eagle, talk about Floxcor, and talk about XXpire, and we'll kind of break them down each one of them as we go through this today. But wanted to kind of give you just a little bit of the agenda as we get kind of started here. So we'll kick it off with our fungicides. And Eagle fungicide, a lot of folks are like, wow, Eagle's been around for a long time, but it's also sometimes a forgotten tool in the tool belt because it's not the shiny new product that's on the market. One of the things that I absolutely think about when I think about Eagle is just how good it is at controlling powdery mildew. It has a bunch of other diseases that it's really good on too, but it really does an awesome job of on powdery mildew. And it kind of seems as a standalone, doesn't really need a tank mix partner, so it does work really well. I will say that it does, because of it is a little bit of an older chemistry. You know, does it have a short REI? That's probably its one downfall in production. And so it does have a 24-hour REI, which is a little bit long for some folks, but the difference that you get out of control definitely makes it a valuable tool out there. And so again, I think Eagle deserves a little bit of a look, just for that reason alone. The other side of things is when we're thinking about the cost side of things, Eagle is a pretty affordable product out there when it comes to when you're thinking about putting together a program. And so whether you're having a rotational program with a couple of different products in it, this can be one of those value added lower end input cost that can help control the cost overall. A little bit of the science, because even though this has been on the market for a while, many of you probably forget about just why it's so why it does such a great job on crops. And so one of the things that I think is easy to tell by this is by showing you what it looks like when we do mobility testing. And so this is some mobility testing showing the first there on the left. It will show the two black dots kind of on that black and white leaf. That's where the droplets were placed at with a pipette in the lab. And you can then see the leaf as disease control there in the middle. And how did that happen? Well, it became mobile. And so it actually, from the point of where those droplets are, it continued to not only move into the leaf, but it also moved up and through the plant, giving you longer days of protection to the new growth that's being, the plant's putting on. And then there on the right, you can see the untreated leaf covered in powdery mildew. I've done, when I was working in R&D, I started out in fungicide biology, and I had to do some of these little testing myself. And man, that is like some of the work that we do to test mobility is so crazy, because we have to have the leaf equal level, and you don't want it to be, because you don't want that droplet to roll off and then make it mobile that way. So it's just there's a lot of work that goes into proving the mobility of a fungicide. And this is just a great example of what Eagle's doing in the plant for you.
That's cool. I've never seen images like that show how that works its way through the plant.
Yep. So we'll quickly move on to Floxcor fungicide. This is a new fungicide that we brought out to the market, and it is a strobilurin, so it's floxastrobin is the active ingredient, and floxastrobin's actually been on the market for a bit of time, but we actually believe that floxastrobin is kind of a forgotten friend for ornamental growers. And one of the reasons why I say that is because there's things that it does differently than some of the other strobilurins that are on the market. And so it has the exact same kind of broad spectrum that we would expect out of a strobilurin. Does do some, leaf spots. It does some soil diseases, does botrytis, powdery mildews. And then from an application rate perspective, it's really a cost-effective option when we think about spraying it or drenching it. And it also has just a 12-hour REI, which makes it really easy for growers to be able to utilize this in a rotation. So you want to think about those benefits. Why would I switch to this strobilurin over whatever other strobilurins I'm looking for? And so I look upon why I think it's important. It has extremely quick uptake, and I'll talk through that just in a little bit. The rapid movement, here we are in the month of May in Indianapolis. I couldn't miss having a race car themed a slide in there. And then a little bit of enhanced spectrum. So there are a few diseases that are picked up by this one that some of the other aren't. And then it's a foundational product for us. And so one of the things that we know that there's a big trend in is mixture formulations in the marketplace. And so while we didn't have a very robust program, we brought Floxcor to market so that we have a good mix partner for future new molecules that are coming down the pipeline. And so we're excited by this, but we also still thought we should get this out into the marketplace and let growers get a little bit more familiar with it. Let me talk you through some of these other things like the quick uptake that I mentioned. And kind of before this, I wanted to kind of show, here's the list of all the other kind of strobes that are out there in the marketplace. And we just really wanted to point out the fact, really good disease spectrum, movement within the plant, efficiency and attacking that pathogen, the residual, and again, certain other diseases, in this case, dollar spot, but that's not necessarily super important for us as growers. But again, just shows you that it is, compared to some of the other products on the marketplace, it kind of does lead the way. It also has very good usage. We already kind of talked about that. So from a cost perspective, the ounces per 100 gallons is pretty minimal. So your low use rates will help you make an application that's pretty cost effective. So before I move too much on into the insecticides, I wanted to touch base just real quickly on that fast movement. So one of the things about Floxcor that we hinted at was its quickness and getting into the plant. And some of the other competitive products are about 2 hours out. And so you think about thinking about like poinsettias on mist and the need to protect them. Floxcor is 15 minutes. Wow. And it's rain fast. And so that's a really, whether it be an outdoor grower, in the South, or a greenhouse grower, it really does help, both in the greenhouse and nursery settings where you've got either mist or overhead irrigation going on, and being able to have a product that you can get into the plant quickly. And again, especially in poinsettias, getting them to root in, have that mist back on in a short amount of time without having risk to the plant. All right, so we're going to move on a little bit to some insecticides and some resistance management that we always want to talk a little bit about. So many of you hopefully have heard of XXpire, and it's kind of one of our key products that we have at Corteva. It's really combines 2 active ingredients to control more than 39 insects, including 7 of the top 10 chewing and sap-feeding insects. But we all know why we're here today. We're here for poinsettias. And if we're here for poinsettias, that means we're talking about whitefly. And whitefly is absolutely on the top 10 list of insects that growers are challenged with. And so we're going to talk a little bit about XXpire and poinsettia production and where I feel like this is a good product and where you should use it at in the rotation. So first off, a little bit, just to kind of kick things off, greenhouse grower, with market research, when we bring products to market, we really do want to take in the needs of the grower. And so some of the things in the feedback that we had gotten in the past was, we need things that are plant safe. And I think about poinsettias, open bract or colored bract poinsettias have been notoriously a little bit sensitive. And in fact, when we do screening, poinsettias are part of our screening process. And so when we can check the box on plant safety, that's a big one to us. We don't get as good a control as we would like with some of the existing products, so we're always looking for something new. We'd love to see new products that have fewer applications during the season. I mean, nobody likes to spray. I get that. Re-entry interval is big. We've seen those drop down dramatically over the years. We were 48, 24s, and now we're down to 12s and 4s and even some 0s, out there. And so those are kind of things that we want to continue to drive to. We've seen a lot of the same family of chemistry for a long time. The industry's actually lost some products in the marketplace. So really looking for just overall better insecticides. And then, we want that broad spectrum insecticides, that one, kind of one shot takes care of everything. And then everybody always wants systemic activity. They want to protect that plant a little longer term. It also means, typically that means you're also going to be able to spray a little less because you're protecting the plant in the future. So those are the key things that we think about when we bring products to market. And so, that's what we created when we created XXpire. So we brought in 2 active ingredients. We did that because that helps us broaden the spectrum. We also get some ability for some things to kind of enhance the performance of each individual active when we mix it with another. Having a single word caution on the label certainly helps it from an applicator's perspective. It has more than 39 insects, including 7 of the top 10 for nurseries and greenhouses. Minimal phytotoxic risk to plants. When I say minimal, we've done extensive testing with XXpire and have yet to find things that it's really a big issue with. And so that's really great. It's less disruptive to beneficials. I know that there's still quite a few poinsettia growers out there that are playing with beneficials or working with beneficials as a part of their program. So it's important for them to understand how they could utilize XXpire. And then the virtually no odor, that's another important one. I've not only from an employee perspective, but in some cases, some of the retail growers that have folks that are in their area, it's important for them to be able to have a product that doesn't have a lot of smell. So that let's go talk a little bit through this and why this is there. So the really, again, the growers talked and we listened. This was really key. So the 2 active ingredients that we're talking about is sulfoxaflor, which is a group 4C. And so this is a non-neonic option. And so that's what's really important. So you're going to get a lot of the same things of control that you would get from a neonic without that neonic label. And in fact, that's probably one of its biggest selling points there. And then spinetoram. So many of you are probably familiar with a product called Conserve. That would be spinosad. And spinetoram is also in the same chemical group as that. And I call it the next generation of spinosad. And so by doing this, we can really, by mixing these 2 together, they do complement each other really nicely, and they do enhance each other's performance when they're used as this combo. And also, it does a little bit from a resistance management. So from whether you're still utilizing Conserve, doesn't mean you need to switch off of that. It just is another tool that can be utilized in the rotation in a program. And in fact, we made some adjustments to the number of applications per year with XXpire and Conserve, knowing that growers would probably utilize both. And so we've made those changes when we launched XXpire. So what's this 2 different mode of action really tell us about? Well, this really increases the level of target pest control. It really broadens the spectrum of control of both chewing and sap feeding insects. And this does reduce the likelihood of any resistance. Offers another option when we're thinking about IPM rotations. And I think that's an important thing to kind of stop and talk just a little bit about. I talk about IPM rotations. I think for a long time, folks utilized XXpire as an emergency type of pesticide, meaning like the fact, like when I've lost control, I'll use XXpire. Well, I'm here to say, why didn't we include XXpire as part of the solution in the beginning and not get yourself into a rescue mission? And that's, I think, probably the one key takeaway that I wanted to get out really to everybody that we're talking with today, is that put it in part of the rotation. And so many of you probably already utilize a drench early on, and that could still be with neonic. And so, you are expecting to have some level of control from that original drench that you have. And one of the things that I like to think about is I use XXpire as one of my early applications that you would do from a maintenance perspective when you're kind of getting towards the end of where that drench is kind of wearing off. Okay. And it can be the first or second, but just somewhere in that early on kind of aspect. The other place that I want to think about it, and we're going to talk a little bit about it here, is towards the end of production. And I got some slides I'll show you there.
Are you drenching with it early?
No, we're not. No.
Okay.
We're still using it as a spray. Yep.
Right. Okay.
Yep. All right. Just going to cover, and I know we're talking whitefly, but no joke, this thing is really broad spectrum. aphids, whitefly, scales, mealybugs, spider mite suppression, and the list goes on and on. And so again, this offers growers a lot of solutions when it comes to dealing with that. One of the other things that I see a lot of growers do is they're kind of mixologists, they're tank mixers, and so I find it hard to believe that you'd have many more insects that you need to treat for, that you would have the need to add something to the tank. I'm not saying that it's not a good mix partner. I'm just saying, why do you want to have a more expensive spray application by putting something else in the tank, especially from an insecticide perspective? I totally understand you throwing a fungicide in from a labor perspective, but because of its broad spectrum activity, this actually becomes a very affordable type of an application for growers to utilize in a rotation. And again, not rescue mission, have it part of the rotation. Again, being broad spectrum really does the great job there. Going back over some of the chewing insects, there's just tons of Lepidopterus and different types of beetles and things like that it does cover. Let's talk about how fast this thing really does act. So within 9 hours, most of the insects are controlled and really stop feeding altogether. Okay. Within a few minutes, you're going to get aphids and leps to stop feeding. Within 3 hours, XXpire is definitely dry, and you have a reduced risk to any beneficial insects. And then whiteflies and other sap feeding insects are controlled at around that 6 hour mark. So really shortly after that spray application, you're getting control of whitefly. Okay. And then at nine hours, you've really stopped feeding and controlled all of the pests. And so again, super fast acting. You're going to see results the next morning when you walk in if you were having some flare-ups. So this is really a good, solid product, especially when we think about whitefly. And then that REI, 12 hours. So back in again, next morning, you're back in the greenhouses and ready to go. And let's talk a little bit about why this is a long lasting. So this is a xylem mobile. So it moves upward through the plant xylem, and it has translaminar activity. So it moves from the top of the surface inside through the leaf. And why is that important? Well, this helps controls insects out of the line of spray. And so we have seen a great amount of technology coming out in sprayers and things like that, but still getting contact to those insects is important, or getting contact on all the leaves is important. And so between those two things, it really has enhanced the ability of this product to work really well. So, and then, that excellent residual then allows you to have, really good activity, for days and weeks to come, depending on the pest.
Is there a best way to apply this? Is there a best practice for application?
We get asked a lot about fogging, and because it's not necessarily on the label. There's not a lot of verbiage out there on that. I'm a big fan of fogging. I love them, but at the same time, there's still plenty of growers out there with high volume sprayers that are just as effective. So I think about whatever means you have. I think honestly, it does a good job. And one of the things that I think about XXpire is it kind of makes a poor applicator a better one. And that's because it kind of can get into the plant and move within the plant without having to rely simply on coverage. I've shown this before, but we really wanted to kind of show just how easily this does go into dispersion and in the formulation that we have. And so it has a very consistent particle size, low dust, easy to pour and measure. And then again, this really rapid and complete dispersion within water. And so that's really great when we talk about tanks. It makes it a really good and easy to clean up compared to some of the other products on the marketplace. Long lasting depends on the pest. We deal with some of the aphids at 4 weeks, chili thrips at 2 weeks, whitefly at 2 weeks, and some lepidopters at 2 weeks. So, for the most part, I would consider that, pretty acceptable in the marketplace compared to some of the other products out there. How to use this can be used as a tank mix, but like I mentioned before, I kind of use the tank mixing really from a fungicide perspective. I don't know why you would want to have a more expensive insecticide. You can apply this as a foliar spray to the point of runoff up to that, 200 gallon per acre mark. Can be applied with air blast sprayers that are then applied necessarily from a greenhouse perspective, but does have uniformity cover in the upper and lower leaf surfaces is optimum for control. And then some folks do choose to use adjuvants in their mixtures, and certainly that will help optimize control on most insects. So let's talk a little bit about some of the rates and things here. So we're talking about greenhouse rates specifically. And so we want to really get to where we have the whitefly. So we're looking at that 2.75 ounces per 100 gallons is really kind of where we're targeting from a whitefly control. If you were looking to broaden the spectrum a little bit, you could go up to 3.5 and pick up some other things like some spider mite suppression and a few other pests that have a little bit better. But I think 2.75 for most growers is really going to be the sweet spot. So talk through the greenhouse restrictions. Do not apply this to any edible crops. There is no restriction relative to the applications during bloom. So that's really nice. See on some competitive products, you'll see like don't apply to in bloom. And we'll talk through that in just a little bit more associated to poinsettias. We do have, though, a little bit of some considerations to do. And so that's that minimum treatment interval, which is 14 days. You got maximum number of applications is 6, maximum consecutive applications is 2, and then that maximum yearly application is 21.25 ounces. All right. So thinking about that, I made the statement about late in production and or in bloom. And so this is some of the work that we've done with poinsettias, and we've got some info sheets that are available out there. And we'll talk a little bit more about that at the very end about where to access information. But we have tested this many times on different varieties of poinsettias over the years. We've even continued that work over the last couple of years, just to as varieties fall out of relevance and new varieties come to market. We're still doing some behind the scenes testing to still say that we are not seeing any issues with colored bracts and poinsettias, and that's really key. So like that first year or so, when so many people moved away from safari because of the neonic concerns and things like that, growers were having to make some adjustments to their programs, and they found themselves with a late season whitefly issue, and they're like, what do we do? That this was like uncharted waters for them, because now they've got whitefly, but they also had colored bracts. And so XXpire really did save the day for a lot of growers. But again, I think that one of the things that I like about it is this can be utilized in color right before shipping, and can also give that level of protection once the poinsettia has left the production facility. And so because it's still in the plant, you're going to have a couple of weeks worth of protection, while it's still sitting at a garden center or in transit, things like that, so that the homeowner or recipient isn't necessarily inundated with any pests when they get it home. All right. So in summary, go over just a few of the key points that we had to talk through here. 2 active ingredients, sulfoxaflor and spinetoram. 2 different modes of action, really reduces the resistance issues. Controls more than 39 insects, including 7 of the top 10. Minimal phytotoxic risk to plants on over 300 ornamental crops. Less disruptive to beneficials, dries quickly. Fast acting, so controls most pests within hours and reentry of only 12 hours. Long lasting residual activity for up to 4 weeks, depending on the pest. So wrapping that thing up, it's always important for us to really kind of talk through resistance issues. And so I just really wanted to just have a couple of slides talking about the different types of resistance when we think about pesticide usage, and why we need to have robust rotations. And so pests have a few different ways of developing resistance. In this case, that target site resistance, it's where the target site is where the insecticide acts inside the insect. Okay, that may be genetically modified to prevent the insecticide from binding or interacting And so it just really reduces the effect of the insecticide. Metabolic resistance, it's really kind of the most common of the mechanisms. And really, it's just the ability for the insect to be able to detoxify or destroy that toxin. And then this really, we'll see this with resistant strains really possess higher levels or more efficient forms of these enzymes where they build up this inside them. And so that's probably one of the things we want to be most cautious of. Penetration resistance, I kind of look upon this one as another one that's kind of key, but it's really the ability for them to kind of like that outer cuticle really kind of slows the absorption, okay? And that kind of makes it be able to tolerate those chemical application. And then behavioral resistance, and the easiest way for me to say this is just like they can apparently recognize Tyvek coming at them. Because they're out there, and as soon as we're out spraying, they're out hiding, and so it's that behavioral. They can recognize there's danger. They can sense that there's been some kind of an application, and they go into hiding. So these are just some of the important things we want to think about, and how insects do build resistance.
And the quicker they're creating new generations, the quicker that resistance comes. I've been fascinated by some of Dr. Ray Cloyd's presentations where he talks about just how quickly populations can build up and reproduce, and how quickly that resistance can, those sort of changes within the insect or mite can happen.
Yeah, absolutely. And like growers, just like, especially you think about thrips in general. I mean, that is in my head, that's who I always think about as having resistance the quickest. And like you could do it within the season just by not having a robust enough spray program. So a little bit of information thinking about positioning of XXpire. So last application prior to shipping, I kind of already covered that, but I just really want to drive that. This really eliminates pest pressure through the transport and delivery. Plants arrive pest-free. And again, it's no phytotoxicity issues on poinsettias. And so this will have plants that have no insects, but they also don't have any insecticide damage. And then there's also no visible residue that leaves those plants just very clean and vibrant.
It's so much good information. I really appreciate all of your time on this. When you talk about the fact that you should consider or use XXpire in a rotation, not just, oh geez, now I gotta save this crop. I think that's definitely a point that I want to reiterate, and the fact that it is safe late in the game on colored bracts. And the one thing that you said that I hadn't even thought about is that does give some additional coverage to that plant when it is sitting in a garden center, or even going home into a shopper's living room. But those are both, I think, just things I wanted to reiterate. Can you tell, before we wrap up, I just want to make sure that all the viewers and listeners know where to go to find out more about these products. I mean, you referenced Eagle, Floxcor, XXpire, and then the rest of the products that you guys have in your Santa's workshop. And how can folks reach out and talk to your technical team at Corteva? Because you guys have a lot of really smart folks out in the market that are there to answer questions.
Yeah, absolutely. So there is QR code here. You can scan this and get product updates, product labels, find out the different solutions that are out there. There's some different news and articles and stuff like that all on the website there. So that's a really great way to do that. Here's my information. I get a lot of people who send me pictures and calls and text and all that stuff, and I'm open for that. It's out there. I work across the United States, so there's really no time where I feel like that it's inappropriate. I get it. It happens. It's the nature of the beast, and so I'm always happy to help whenever I can. But I'm not the only person. Just like you said, there's a great amount of folks out across the team, and so we do have territory managers that are strategically placed out across the country. We still have an open position out west. In the Pacific Northwest. But everywhere else we've got some folks covering there. And so don't hesitate to reach out to your distributor and say, hey, I'd like to meet with the Corteva rep, or feel free to reach out to myself and I'll get you in contact with the proper person. We've also got 3 field scientists that are strategically placed across the US who also help us with any kind of technical questions and concerns that we may have. And kind of they have some specialties, whether it be weed management, insect management, or some of the pathology work that we do. So again, feel free to reach out. We're happy to get you in contact, and we always are interested in helping out.
Well, and it's cool with such a huge team. I think for the listeners and viewers, no matter what you're growing, no matter where you're located, no matter the size of your operation, there's a big team in Corteva that are there to stand behind you and partner and answer all the questions you've got, and then a huge range of products in Santa's bag of tricks to help everybody out. I really do appreciate your time as always. I'm glad you threw some information in there about the resistance management. I think that's just always important to keep in mind. When I was looking through that checklist you had early on about the different things you wanted to tackle with XXpire when it was in product development, that was quite a list, but I think it shows the dedication and I guess how you guys understand the marketplace, what growers are looking for, but also some of the more let's be responsible using these products kind of things that are extremely critical. And like you said, we've dropped REIs from multiple days to a day to half a day, even lower than that. And I think that's something that our industry can be very proud of. And it's with the companies like Corteva that are supplying these products, having that goal, I think is absolutely important. So thank you so much for your time. Next time we talk, we're going to be talking tips and tricks for managing weeds in perennial production, nursery production, and I'm really looking forward to that as well. So we're going to have to do that. But before that, we've got Cultivate. So I do want to just mention to all the folks listening and watching that when you're at Cultivate, stop by the Corteva booth. You'll see Broch there. You'll see a lot of these team members, I'm sure. You can get your hands on some of these products and learn about them and sort of engage in person, which is something our industry's always known for and something that's really important.
And I'm going to give out the big shout out since you already kind of kicked it off into Cultivate. Stop by Sunday night across the street from the convention center. I don't know if you guys made it out last year. I think you guys actually did, but we were our happy hour event. It was probably one of the coolest events at Cultivate, not just because it was a Corteva event, because it was an all industry event. Yeah. There were manufacturers, growers, distributors. Like, it was really well attended. And who doesn't like tacos and tequila? So
absolutely. Sounds like a win to me. I can't wait.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, again, thanks for the time today. I appreciate it. And good luck to all the growers out there. Holler if you guys need anything.
Definitely a good recommendation. And I think that puts a little bow on the top of this presentation. That'll be my last holiday cliche. I'm Bill Calkins with Tech on Demand on behalf of the entire team at Ball Publishing, the team at Corteva. Thanks for listening. Thanks for watching. Take care out there.